I say boom, boom, boom. Now everybody say way-oh, way-oh.
And as I said just a second ago, we're doing my F1 unpopular opinion. Now, I've got a controversial one. That's the point of unpopular opinions, but I've got a controversial one. I think backmarkers can be good for Formula 1. And I have a number of reasons for why I actually believe this is true. Now, a little bit of context. Ever since the early 2010s, we had Caterham, Marussia and HRT all absolutely flop, and let me just say they were goddamn awful. But I think there are some positives to backmarker cars. Maybe not that backmarker, but teams further back in the grid that truly maybe will never be competitive. Now, in the current age of Formula 1, B teams are becoming more regular. You've got Alpha Tauri, we've obviously got Williams fostering a Mercedes driver, and we've got Alfa Romeo as well, and maybe we'll see Haas doing a similar thing in the future. And whilst it is a shame to look at teams and say, you're arguably never going to win a championship in this car, I think that's understandable. That's the same as anything. You have lower leagues in football, and yes, I understand you have the lower leagues, Formula 2, Formula 3, which you can compare to, but even then, I think getting experience as a young driver is something that is getting harder and harder, because at the moment, you look at some of the young drivers coming through, only a few of them are going to get seats, especially considering drivers are getting older once again. Drivers are starting to compete at an older age than they were a few years back when drivers were retiring, at least a few years earlier, as sports science continues to progress, and I believe it will continue further. So I think backmarkers will be positive. First of all, backmarkers offer another set of racing. Now yes, you may say, oh, they're not competing for the championships, that's boring. You watch the relegation fight in the Premier League, that's one of the best goddamn bits, and that's the shitholes fighting. The shitty fights can be more exciting than the head-to-heads at the front, because the head-to-heads at the front is like, perfect move, and, or not perfect move, you know what I mean, they're always going to be on the front foot of everything. At the back, it's carnage, and it's awesome to watch at times, I can't lie. Drivers scrapping for their careers, or to get that big move forward. So I think a backmarker, or a couple of backmarker teams, wouldn't be a bad thing to have in the sport. It adds another layer, another dynamic. We've sort of seen it this year, to be honest. We've had the Haas, Alphas and Williams kind of competing at the back, and it'll be interesting to see which of the six come out as the best of the backmarkers, because I think that sets a precedent down. You get best of the backmarkers, you're driving the shitter, but you're beating everybody else in your category as such, so I think it brings forward something of value. Now, on my comment a second ago, on the fact that we're starting to get B teams, I don't think that's a bad thing. Now, you may look at it and say, oh, that means less competitive teams, but at the end of the day, there's always going to be like 3 to 4 teams at best competing for a championship. So having teams that are maybe specifically focused on being a youth team wouldn't be a bad thing, because there's plenty of teams out there and plenty of people that want to create F1 teams that maybe don't have the finance to come in and become a McLaren or Ferrari or a Mercedes. However, they have the passion for the sport, the energy to put it in, and maybe on a localised level would be really good for younger drivers. You think back when the Manor and whatnot were there, like Daniel Ricciardo, Jules Bianchi, Esteban Ocon, Pascal Wehrlein, all of them began their drives in those backmarker small teams. And I think they offer a different opportunity. What they could do is, as there are becoming drivers returning older, you look at Alonso, Vettel's hanging about, Hamilton is looking like becoming a 7, 8, 9 time world champion, drivers are getting older. And that's leaving less spots, especially with only 20 on the grid, so encouraging smaller teams wouldn't be a bad thing. Then what I think they'd have to do, or the way to make it fairer, because I think we all agree that with the financial backing that these teams may lack, it would be difficult for them to compete. However, what they could do is they could kind of have like a driver-funded program, maybe like a draft setup, where if a team comes into the sport as a B team, they get a fund and maybe a draft for a driver. So, for example, what you could have is each of the top teams have a driver that they can select of their young drivers. So let's say, for example, there are 3 backmarker teams, and there could be a level as to when you become a backmarker team. So if you're new to the sport, or if you scored less than the equivalent of one race win in the prior season in the constructors, you become a backmarker team for the following year. That first of all would make drivers fight for their careers that much more, because if you think, and what then happens, and this is going to get quite complicated to explain. So if you get less than 25 points in the current racing situations in your constructors team, you have to take a rookie or young driver on for the following season. And if you're a new team as well, the same rules apply. Now, this would mean that some teams would often be taking on a new driver, and those new drivers can come from the academies of those top teams. So, each of the teams, so let's say there are 3 teams that get less than the equivalent of 1 win, which probably will happen this year with Haas, Alfa Romeo and Williams. They become backmarker teams for the upcoming season. That does not mean that they have to be there permanently, encouraging investors to come in and say, this backmarker team is really, really good. We can make them if I invest money into a challenging team. So it encourages people to invest in these backmarkers that people currently say are hopeless, and they also get a quality driver. The rules are simple. The teams, each of those teams, let's say there are 3 teams at the back. The top 3 teams of the championship the prior year, let's say this year it may well be Mercedes, Red Bull and McLaren, let's say it's those 3. Mercedes, Red Bull and McLaren all offer up a rookie driver or a young driver, or one of their youngsters, because they have a lot of them, let's be brutally honest, and they then get stuck into a draft. The 3 teams that finish at the bottom get to select one of them each, with the highest performing team selecting first and the lowest performing team selecting last. This would add like a punishment and reward system, as well as encouraging, forcing drivers that are currently in seats, such as Magnussen and Grosjean, to say, we have to speed up. If we don't get 25 points for the end of the season, one of us is out of a contract regardless, because the team has to bring in this new young driver. It'll make silly season more exciting, and I think a draft would be cool in Formula 1. It'd be a little new addition, and teams can apply to be a B team as well. If you want to permanently become a B team, this is the alternative. Teams come in and apply for a B team fund and a driver from one of the A teams as such. You get that. It adds more drive to the sport, more action, more excitement, and I think it wouldn't be too bad to see. I think it'd be exciting. As I say, it adds another dynamic, and it also stop teams such as Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull stockpiling their academies, like we see in football with Chelsea, stockpiling their academies and then turning around and saying, we have no seats available. Because then they can turn around to say to Campos Racing, who are a small team, or Prema, who've decided to step into Formula 1, and say, we've got this young driver for you, you have to take on an under-23 as part of your ruling because you applied for extra funding as a B team. Take our lad, he's super promising, we can now get him a seat rather than him getting swapped under the rug, like we've seen Esteban Ocon and many others in the past and will continue to see. This is an awesome opportunity for all parties involved. Win-win-win, more action on track. Yes, slight pain in the arse with other drivers. More racing, more youngsters coming in, more opportunities, more teams, more people able to enjoy the sport. I think it's a win-win situation. What do you think? What do you think? Should backmarker teams be allowed? Should we have backmarker teams where a few teams come in, sign themselves up as B teams, get an extra finance, but have to take an under-23 driver for one of the A teams? Do you agree with that or not? That was a weird explanation. I dig that now, but we're going to roll with that. That's the first cut. That's the final cut. That's Podcast Live for you.